So, with another year of basketball behind us in the NBA and potentially a lot of changes ahead of us, I deemed it necessary to make a video highlighting some of the most important things that we learned throughout this past NBA season. Because I do believe a lot of events that have transpired in this past season will significantly alter what we should expect moving forward with a lot of NBA teams and players. And so with that being said, let's get right into the video. First, we have the Lakers building a new super team. After winning a championship, the Lakers struggled mightily to gain any consistent grounding in the playoff standings throughout the regular season. And by the end of the year, not only did they find themselves with the 7th seed in the Western Conference, but also ended their postseason run by the hands of a very inexperienced Phoenix Suns team. Now, of course, the context of both Anthony Davis and LeBron James dealing with injuries during the regular season and postseason is not only necessary, but are very reasonable explanations to why the outcome was a first-round exit. However, what wasn't reasonable was how the supporting cast performed around both AD and LeBron. Because entering this year, on paper, the Lakers had one of the most talented rosters in the NBA, but by the end of the season, many members in the supporting cast had underperformed immensely. To address this concern, the front office out in LA had a lot of pressure on their shoulder to make drastic changes to the roster, and that they did. One of the very first moves in this year's offseason was trading Kyle Kuzma, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Montrezl Harrell to the Washington Wizards, and in return the Lakers received Russell Westbrook, which immediately sparked several different conversations and debates in the NBA community. For starters, can Russell Westbrook shake the negative stigmas that have been surrounding his career for the better part of the past 5 seasons? And by doing so, the outcome would have to be a championship, because with this level of talent on one roster, the expectations have to be set that high. Also, can LeBron continue to add to his already all-time great legacy? Because at age 36 going on 37, there's only so many opportunities that are still left on the table. But more importantly, can this Lakers roster stay healthy enough to compete for a deep postseason run? Because if there's anything that this last postseason run has taught us, is that the best ability is availability. Number 2, big men are dominant again. Over the past decade, as we all know, the perception on how basketball should be played has changed significantly. Now, of course, the individual who possibly has the most influence in that shift would happen to be Stephen Curry. However, I would argue a huge reason why the NBA and eventually all of basketball shifted away from the traditional logic of how to score is because there weren't that many dominant bigs in the early 2010s. And because of the lost art of post hooks, up and unders, post fades, the league became a bit more comfortable with shifting power forwards to the center position. And most of those teams who were willing to make that shift early on were rewarded immensely, to the tune of winning multiple championships. And now here we are in a copycat league, and every team in the NBA has at least one lineup where they could go small. But now with the emergence of some very dominant big men, I honestly don't know what's going to happen next, and it will be very interesting to see how the league continues to shift. Giannis Antetokounmpo not only won league MVP twice in the past 3 years, but also won Defensive Player of the Year last season and finished this year with an iconic and historic postseason run that resulted in not only a championship but Finals MVP. Nikola Jokic, superstar center for the Denver Nuggets, finished this season winning league MVP and dominated in historic fashion offensively. And then you have Joel Embiid, and many people would argue if he had stayed healthy throughout the regular season that he would make a very legitimate argument to why he should have won league MVP over Nikola Jokic, and there's some credibility to that argument. Embiid dominated in historic fashion and did so relatively while being a post player. Now, I'm not saying that Giannis, Embiid, and Jokic are about to go on a stretch of dominance that will be so influential that will revert the NBA back to 90s basketball. But what I am saying is that it will be very interesting to see how other teams counter to the opposition if they have very talented big men moving forward, because this is not the 2010s. These are very legitimate talented bigs, and even someone who is inexperienced as DeAndre Ayton can still put up historic numbers against your team if you do not have the proper matchup. Up next, we have the whole Ben Simmons and Sixers fiasco, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it because plenty of people have really dug deep on what exactly is next for Philly. But in short, a few years ago, the Sixers started this process where they will purposely lose games, better known as tanking, to put themselves in a better situation to draft potentially franchise-altering talent. The two best players that they selected in the draft over the past handful of seasons are Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, both of which are very talented players, but they do have their obvious flaws, with Joel Embiid consistently being injured and Ben Simmons' inability to have any offensive threat outside of the paint. And because of those problems, despite who's on the roster, despite who's coaching the team, despite the progression of either one of those players, the Sixers still ended the season with a second-round exit. And the biggest reason for this is because of Ben Simmons and his regression as a player. Which then brings us to the undeniable result that Simmons has to be traded because a duo of Embiid and Simmons just will not work out. Now, this storyline is interesting for several reasons, but the two biggest factors that I have to highlight is A, the perception around the league on Ben Simmons and his trade value, which has been very eye-opening. Before the season even began, there were numerous conversations about how James Harden was going to be traded to the Philadelphia 76ers, and in return, the Rockets should expect someone of Simmons' status, as well as a few other assets. However, here we are after the infamous postseason run, and Simmons' trade value has dropped so significantly that in return, the Sixers are receiving fringe all-star players, which is definitely concerning because I don't really know if that does anything for the Sixers' chances of potentially winning a championship, which then is the second and most important thing that I have to highlight in this video. I truly do not believe that there are enough people out there who thoroughly understand the severity of the Sixers situation right now. Because we are not only talking about an organization who is on the brink of trading away one of their cornerstones for, again, a fringe all-star player, but this is also an organization that has built their whole identity around Joel Embiid and how dominant of a presence that he has been throughout his young NBA career. However, he only has 2 years left under his contract. So there is a huge possibility that within a year or two's time, the Sixers could not only lose Ben Simmons, but could potentially also lose Joel Embiid. The next thing that we learn is that Stephen Curry and Kevin Durant are still really good at the game of basketball. Now, this is not to diminish anything that they have ever accomplished, and personally, I thought that some people's opinions on Stephen Curry's inability to lead a team without playing with any stars was really silly. But even with that being said, I was still a bit concerned for Stephen Curry and the level of productivity that he was going to provide for the Warriors consistently, mainly because the rest of the roster lacked a lot of experience. However, I and many other people were extremely wrong. Curry not only led the Warriors to a winning record, but if there wasn't this ridiculous play-in tournament, then the Warriors would have been in the playoffs. And what's even more impressive is that in the month of April, Steph Curry had literally one of the greatest months of basketball I've ever seen in my entire life. And then on the other hand, with Kevin Durant, the reason why I was so hesitant to give the Nets just the easy runway to a championship is because I didn't necessarily know what KD was going to look like coming back from an Achilles injury. And quite frankly, I was still hesitant even entering to the playoffs because even though, yes, during the regular season, Durant did play well, but the sample size was so small because he was consistently resting. However, after 2 impressive rounds in the playoffs, as well as Durant feeling comfortable enough to play basketball in the Olympics, then I do believe it is fairly safe to say that Durant is back and arguably better than ever because some of the scoring performances that he put on this year was also very impressive. Now, the reason why this is also very important is because heading into the next season is where things get extremely interesting. The Warriors should expect Klay Thompson to come back in the mix, which would immediately make them postseason contenders, and I would argue very deep postseason runs in the near future. And if you don't believe that, the Warriors have several different assets that they could trade to other organizations to bring even more talent to the team so they can contend for another championship in the near future. And then on the other hand, with the Brooklyn Nets, if Kevin Durant is going to play this well, as long as he can stay healthy, as well as Kyrie Irving and James Harden, well, I'm just going to be completely honest with you all. The Brooklyn Nets should come out fairly easy in the Eastern Conference next year, with their only true competition being the Milwaukee Bucks. Which means with both Curry and Durant still playing at all-time highs, their rosters getting better next season, there is a great possibility that we see the Golden State Warriors and the Brooklyn Nets match up in the NBA Finals, which of course will be a treat for everyone. Number 6. A lot of teams in the NBA honestly were exposed. I say that as a prefix to expect a lot of changes in the upcoming season, because this was a postseason run where a lot of teams underperformed despite the fact that there were a lot of things in their favor. I mean, if you think about it, this is a postseason run that did not feature a healthy Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, James Harden, or Jamal Murray. Nor is this a postseason run that featured the Golden State Warriors. So if you're an organization that fell short in this playoffs, then you really have to recalibrate what's going on your roster, what's going on in your organization, because more than likely you are further removed from competing for a championship than you would like to be. And we've already seen some teams make some significant changes, or at least rumored to be making some changes in the near future. The Boston Celtics have already moved off of Kemba Walker. The Philadelphia 76ers are rumored to trade Ben Simmons. There's been some allegations that Damian Lillard does not feel comfortable in Portland because he does not believe that they're moving in the right direction to compete for a championship. And now more Bradley Beal rumors are starting to resurface again, mainly because the Wizards have basically ran out of options. They finally moved on John Wall, brought in Russell Westbrook, and even at their best, the Wizards were nowhere near close to being a complete elite team in the NBA. Now look, I'm not saying that all of these teams are going to make any massive or significant changes in the next upcoming months, but I do believe that this year will be the turning point for a lot of organizations, because it's undeniable. If you were not able to compete in this year's playoffs, then you are further than where you would like to be in terms of competing for a championship. And finally, and even though I don't want to make this a Giannis take, I do believe that the Milwaukee Bucks as an organization has done an amazing job over the past few years putting the right pieces around Giannis. So from a front office perspective, they should receive a lot of credit. Chris Middleton as a scorer has grown a lot. I believe that Jrue Holiday will finally receive the credit that he rightfully deserves. And the rest of the role players on the Milwaukee Bucks did an exceptional job, and they all have their own individual stories that should be told. And I am happy that an organization in a small market that did not overly depend on tanking or top draft picks actually won a championship, because I do believe that representation of a championship winner is needed in today's NBA. But with all of that being said, it is very important to highlight what we just witnessed from Giannis. In my personal opinion, Giannis is the best player in the NBA. And no, I am not overreacting to the 50-piece that Giannis gave us in Game 6 to close the NBA Finals. This has been a 3 to 4 year process, and every year Giannis has taken the right step in becoming an NBA superstar. And I would go as far as saying after this postseason run, he's taken the right steps to become an NBA legend, because that's how amazing Giannis has been, again, not just this year, but over the past 3 to 4 years. At 26 years old, we're talking about a 2-time league MVP, a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, and more importantly, he is now a champion, a Finals MVP recipient, and he did so while putting up historic numbers. And even if you don't believe he is the best player in the NBA, which personally I believe is slightly disrespectful, I mean, what more does Giannis have to do to prove that he is the best player in the league? And if you go back and look at what he's accomplished in the past 4 to 5 years, I do believe it is time to start having conversations about where he ranks all time. Because with the resume that Giannis has accumulated within the last 4 to 5 years, he has accomplished things that other all-time great players haven't been able to accomplish. And finally, the last thing that we learned this year is that I'm streaming on Twitch consistently now. If you don't know, make sure you click the link in the description. I consistently stream on Twitch and talk about basketball topics, so make sure you go check me out there. Also, follow me on Twitter as well so you can be updated when I do go on Twitch. And finally, let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to be updated when I upload on this channel. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.